I know for some people this might be hard to hear or even believe because it's not what anyone thought they were voting for. But the truth is, Trump has been ushering in a technocratic state, consolidating power in ways no president ever has. Today, we're joined by investigative journalist, documentary filmmaker, and author of How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, Derek Broze. He's recently published a powerful series on the last American vagabond titled The Technocratic Trump Administration, where he breaks down how, in just the past 10 months, Trump has rapidly advanced the agenda of his technocratic and Zionist backers. Derek Broze, welcome back to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Cam. I appreciate it.
Okay, let's talk about this technocratic state that Trump is building. It does look to be pretty scary what's happening with, just the basics that we all know about, right? Which is TikTok, for example, now being sold off to Larry Ellison. You know, they're saying, oh, we can't have China controlling it, but now we could have a super Zionist controlling it. And I know that there's more. So kind of give us the overview of tell us, what the problem is with the technocratic state and how then Trump is marching us towards it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like this has kind of been an ongoing conversation between you and I and other people who are paying attention to this for quite some time before Trump's second term here. But obviously, since Trump's come back into office, it's become quite clear who he's going to partner with. And I decided to try to kind of do a recap of everything we've seen because we're only 10 months going on 11 months into Trump's first year and things are moving very quickly in all kinds of different directions. And I find that seems to be a strategy of, on purpose, a chaotic strategy by design in order to keep the people and also the enemies of Trump, as Steve Bannon has put it, from being able to just make heads or tails of what's going on. And so there's so much happening that I wanted to write a really just concise article series for The Last American Vagabond to recap some of these things. And even just looking at the last couple of months, like it's become pretty clear that what I'm now calling the big technocrats, they come from the big tech industry, Zuckerberg, all the people that met at the White House just a couple of months ago, people that in Trump's first term and during COVID 1984, especially when it comes to Bill Gates, the MAGA movement was very much opposed to and calling out for all sorts of things, and now are being asked to sort of forget about that and be okay with Trump aligning with these people, bringing them to the White House, making billion-dollar deals with them. And I think that this is worrisome because for those who understand the history of technocracy and really the goal of this movement, it essentially is the idea that democracy doesn't work, it's flawed, the people are too dumb to know what's good for them, so voting is never going to be enough to fix society, and that the capitalists, the business class, are not capable of fixing things. So instead, we should have the experts, the engineers, trust the experts is something we, of course, heard many times. And those experts, those engineers, or those technocrats should be micromanaging society. And I think this is where things are headed. When I see talk of dismantling the U.S. government or getting rid of things like U.S. aid, which myself and you and plenty of other people have legitimate concerns about, I don't see this as an effort to make government smaller and more responsible to the people. I think what we're actually witnessing is a move toward technocracy, dismantling the various institutions of government, but not to make it so that the people have more power, but so that those big technocrats have all the power. And so like I said, I tried to recap so much of what's happening because it does seem to be moving pretty quickly.
It's been really disheartening, to be honest. I had so much hope for a Trump presidency. I really did. I knew I didn't want Biden or Kamala. That's for sure. Didn't like what they were up to. Certainly didn't like what Democrats did during COVID and how they were consolidating power and implementing control over all of us. That was pretty dystopian. And so I think a lot of people voted for Donald Trump thinking that he would unwind all of that, right? That he would ensure that type of thing can't happen. And you're right. It has been, I just had so much hope for the guy, and now I just think he's the worst president of my lifetime. And it's not, there's a lot of things he does that are identical to what George Bush did or what Obama did when it comes to droning people, killing people, endless regime change wars, all of that stuff. But like you're mentioning, on top of it, this technocratic, the marching in of the consolidation of power. And it's all done under the guise of, well, Doge is cutting all of these programs. Doge is we need to consolidate. We need to get rid of things. Oh, but then we're going to put Palantir in charge of all of our data. So rather than our data being dispersed amongst a bunch of bureaucratic administrations, we instead have one place with all that. It's like, what do you think they're going to do with that one place where they centralize all the data? Like, obviously, it's now going to be a lot easier for them to figure out whether or not you and I behaved, right? And we're doing the things that we're
Absolutely.
supposed to be doing. And I mean, talk about, people have been so afraid of the social credit score system with China, so afraid of of passport, vaccine passport type things, or digital IDs, digital currency, all of these things. And yeah, this guy is marching us faster towards all of that. Then
Absolutely.
he's not unwinding it at all.
No, it's advancing quite fast. So I'd love to point out a couple of specifics here for the audience who
Yeah.
maybe have missed this because, as I said, things are moving quite fast. Briefly, to your point about the drone bombing and these other issues that we could spend all day on, I think it's so important for people to understand that I've been calling it lately the baton of tyranny. So Bush, post 9/11, starts doing whatever he wants, says he has permission because, well, terrorists are bad and we need to protect America. Obama promises he's going to come, change things. We're going to go after the torturers, et cetera. Then he gets into office and says it's time to look forward, not backwards. And he does it
Yeah.
even worse, and then drops more drone bombs than any president. And then Donald Trump comes in the first time. He drops even more drone bombs than Obama in the first year. He also issued an executive order which ended the reporting requirement. So now, since Trump's first term, we have no idea how many drone bombs Biden dropped and how many Trump has dropped already, besides what we're publicly seeing with these boats. But it's that same alleged justification that Obama used to say, hey, I can drone bomb anyone in the world, violating other countries' borders if somebody's a threat to America. And now Trump is using that same justification. It's no longer about Muslim terrorists in the Middle East. Now it's about alleged cartel members, alleged gang members, and drug dealers. But it's the same alleged legal justification. It's never really been tested in the courts, but Trump is just taking that baton that was used by Bush, used by Obama, used by Trump, used by Biden. And I think that's important for people to understand, because I think you're right as well. A lot of people voted for Trump because they had some faith or hope or belief that it would be the opposite or something different, at least, than Biden, Kamala. I wrote an article back in October 2024, just a year ago, saying it was titled Election 2024, Zionist Technocrats versus Zionist Technocrats, and showing the various people who are funding both sides. And not to be cynical or black-pilled, but to try to give a bit of a reality check and to get people to think that, ultimately, unfortunately, both of these sides of the equation are funded by the same people. So who knows what it would have been like under Biden or under Harris, if it would have moved faster, slower, et cetera. I tend to argue it might have been maybe a little slower, because in this case, the MAGA folks are ready to make any excuse for Trump and claim it's good for us. One example is the first focus of my first article, which is public-private partnerships. You've probably heard about this throughout COVID, Kim. Most people were talking about it largely because of the World Economic Forum. World Economic Forum announces in June 2020 the Great Reset Initiative, and it's time to remake capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. They call themselves the International Organization for Public-Private Partnerships. So they're like, we're the big guys who really champion this cooperation between private industry and governments. And at that time, many people were rightfully critical of it, saying, hey, this is corporatism, or maybe a step towards fascism or cronyism. At the least, it's something that's not good. And this is one of the ways that organizations like the World Economic Forum get their foot in the door, so to speak, and start promoting their agendas by partnering with governments, and then through that trying to force DEI and things like that, right? So people were very much against this. Well, now under Trump, just in the first 10 months here, I mean, in my article, I talk about a number of purchases that have been done. We got the big one is the Intel 10% stake, the U.S. government buying 10% stake in Intel. There's several other mining companies I found as I was researching this. So under Trump, there's already, I believe it's up to 6 now companies that the U.S. government has bought stock in, stake in, and they have different kind of quid pro quo going on. But this is clearly a public-private partnership where Trump is saying the U.S. government is going to now own 10% of this chip maker. We're going to get profits on the back end. And of course, he's trying to spin it like this is going to be good for the American people, as if we're going to see profits or something like that.
Right.
I highly, highly doubt that. But, my point with that is that had this been Biden or Harris or Obama, people would have said, hey, that's socialism, that's fascism, that's corporatism. And there's been, mostly silence from the MAGA crowd about these things, or they're celebrating it because, again, they're being told it's for their good of America. But there's a number of different incidents like this that I call out in this article. I think that's one major point people should see is like, if it was wrong for the other side, then why aren't we calling it out for this side?
Right. But okay, so I understand that aspect of it, but what's the danger of the government buying 10% of Intel?
Well, I think
So
that
besides it being a hypocritical, like,
It's
Oh,
a
that would be
hypocritical move.
socialist. Yeah,
Sure,
but
yeah.
how does it affect us, do you think, on the technocratic side?
Well, I think it's part of that merging of state and corporate power, which is a big part of technocracy. I mean, the
Yeah.
technocrats, as called them earlier, the big tech technocrats. So Zuckerberg at Facebook, Elon, et cetera, all these folks that are at the head of the major tech companies, which many people, billions of people use every single day. These are the modern technocrats, and they're in charge of the big tech companies, which we all know. You mentioned Ellison earlier, Larry Ellison. So Oracle receives seed funding from the CIA, Facebook, et cetera. We go on and on, right? So there's already this tight relationship between intelligence and private industry. Somebody argue they're not even really private because of that, and because of the tight relationship, the military industrial complex, they're all part of that. To me, these public private partnerships where the US government is outright buying stake in these companies is just a further kind of blurring of the lines between, is the U.S. government a corporation? Is these corporations part of the government now? And I don't criticize it just on the hand of, oh, it's socialism. I know some people, that's like the first thing they go to. If it was good for us, then great. But I just simply don't see that this is going to be a step in the right direction when we're dealing with companies who clearly don't have the American interest at heart. For example, one of the companies I talk about, I believe it's I can't remember off the top of my head. It's some mining metals company, and they received a buyout from the U.S. government, another 10% stake. And on the same day that stake was announced, that Trump was buying stake in their company, Trump also announced that they were reversing a Biden ban, where they tried to ban access to mining in this really remote part of Alaska. Biden said you couldn't do it because it was endangering Native American communities. Well, Trump reversed that and then announced we're buying stock in this company. So it just seems like it's more quid pro quo. I mean, some people will chalk it up to Trump being a good businessman, but I think it's ultimately him showing that the people who've supported him and the people who are loyal to him, they're going to be rewarded either by the U.S. government propping them up and buying stake in their companies, like in the case of Intel, which was largely a failing company. I mean, the closest example we have to this would be the financial crisis of 2007, 2008, 2009. Obama and Bush before him propping up the big banks, too big to fail. But at that time, you could at least argue, well, we're in the middle of an economic collapse. Obviously, there was some funny business going on that got us to that point. In this case, it's just Trump saying, we're going to buy stake in these companies. And again, I think that for me, the most worrisome aspect is that blurring of the lines between government and state. I mean, government and corporation, excuse me.
Right. Well, because obviously if they have a stake in Intel, they're going to want to do something with it, right?
And
It's not
that's the
just
other aspect, is how do they start using that on these alleged private companies? And in terms of Intel, that is kind of part of a larger conversation about the chip wars going on between China and the US. And so Trump is promoting it as, this is us building up an American company so we can not have to be dependent on Chinese chips. But I think that also goes towards a sort of false dichotomy argument of like, it's only the Chinese, like you were saying with the social credit scores, it's only the Chinese government that is doing bad things with our data. Don't worry, if we get it in the hands of the US government, then that's all good and everything's great. I think most people here listening today will understand that that's not true.
You say in your piece that it's a Zionist, it's not just technocratic partnership, but it's actually like Zionist focused.
Yeah, I think that's pretty clear from Larry Ellison to every other person, Peter Thiel, obviously, Alex Karp, all the folks at Palantir, as you mentioned. They clearly have a pro-Israel, and not even just like a pro-Israel where hey, Israel has a right to exist, but these are people who either deny the violence and the death and the murder that has taken place the last couple of years, or in the case of Alex Karp, sort of celebrate it and they want to give their technology to what's going on over there. And we have, of course, the reality that Trump was brought into office with help from Peter Thiel, with help from people like Miriam Adelson, and before that, her husband. I mean, Trump's entire political career has been helped along by the Zionist lobby. And despite this alleged claims, which I'm sure you've been discussing on your show, of this ceasefire, which I would think it was the ceasefire that never was. There really wasn't really a time where violence had stopped, but it gives Trump the ability to claim he he solved the war and created peace again. But at the end of the day, it's about giving the Zionists what they want. And that's actually where my third piece is going to be picking up, because if you look at this alleged peace deal, just as an example, this was really crazy to me, is that they're actually using the word technocratic in that. If you look up the 20-point peace plan that Trump drew up, when they talk about the management of Palestine post this war, it's going to be representatives from the Palestinian Authority, which of course, the U.S. and Israel will be involved in choosing representatives from the U.S. government and Israeli, and they describe it as a technocratic committee, a technocratic peace committee, which is to me very Orwellian. So they're kind of out in the open now with discussing this, that this isn't going to be some sort of Palestinians deciding their own destiny. This is going to be another micromanaged from the outside with influence from Israel and the U.S., deciding what takes place there, who gets in, and of course, who gets to build those condos they've been wanting to build for so long, like Jared Kushner and other in Trump's orbit.
Yeah. Yeah, they're pretty upfront about it, saying that it's going to be a technocracy. I mean, they flat out say it when it comes to that. And their excuse will be, well, they're terrorists, so we have to watch their every move, right? We have to surveil them. We have to know what they're doing. We have to hear what they're saying. We have to know if they're planning something. So we must. And a lot of
Yeah,
people go along with that. I mean, but that was the whole, notion behind COVID vaccines. I mean, passports. And it was, well, we got to know who's compliant and obedient and who can show up, who can come into our doors. We must know, we must know. And so
sure.
many people were against that. And those same people that were against that level of control and surveillance, because you're some sort of a COVID terrorist, is essentially what their thinking was. Those same people who are against that are pro doing it when it's like an Islamist terrorist.
Yeah,
That's
and I've
flip
heard
it.
people say for years that what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Gaza, is sort of a test bed for what these psychopaths have planned for other parts of the world. And over the years, I thought maybe that's a little bit hyperbolic, but as we get closer to this alleged peace deal, and now they're coming out and saying we're going to have a technocratic committee running things, and they're obviously going to be checking everybody coming in and out, and I don't think it's going to lead to any lasting peace for the Palestinian people. I've been revisiting that thought because it does seem like maybe if the world is willing to turn a blind eye and to allow what's happening over there to happen to the Palestinians, and we know the Israeli intelligence network is massive and billions of dollars, and they've created hundreds and hundreds of companies studying surveillance technology, digital IDs, all this sorts of infrastructure, that maybe when they perfect it there on the Palestinians, then they'll be ready to export it to other places.
I'm positive that is exactly what they plan to do. I mean, once they see that it works there, they're going to be like, okay, over here. And it's not just the Palestinians that they test stuff on. I mean, the Israelis
Sure.
themselves, like when it came to the COVID vaccines, their entire population was forced to take that vaccine. For example, they did a whole deal. They were the first country to get it because
Yep.
their government did the deal doses for data and basically forced all the Israelis into taking the doses so that they could collect the data. I mean, their government, it's, they're not just against the Palestinians. They're kind of against everybody, including their own people. I mean,
It does seem that way, and you're starting to venture off into anti-Semitic territory, Kim. So I'd be careful before your social credit score goes down there. But what you're saying
oh, it's
is
already as low as it can get. It can't get any lower at this point.
what you're saying is 100% accurate. And I wanted to bring up another point on this technocrat, the examples of the technocracy marching forward under Trump. You mentioned Ellison, and I'm sure you've been covering some of the things going on in the media. To me, this is another big part of my second piece in the series is called the consolidation and the pressuring of the media. And I give a few different examples. Talk briefly about the Jimmy Kimmel situation, talk about some of the lawsuits that Trump has filed. He's obviously very litigious and knows he loves to sue people. And we've got the Pentagon with the rules change. And I know there's a lot of different opinions on this, but I just wanted to spend a brief moment on this because what I'm seeing in my kind of social media circles is there are people in MAGA and just let's say that those of us searching for truth who rightfully so are critical, like both of us are, of the mainstream corporate media for lies about weapons of mass destruction and lies about COVID and any number of other issues we could go on. So then when they see these various moves Trump is making, or let's say Pete Hegseth with his new rules at the Pentagon, where you had a major walkout with all the media, including Fox News, Daily Caller, conservative Trump supporting media who said, we're not going to sign this pledge. We'd rather leave the Pentagon. I see some people in the online audience, yes, great, sticking it to the mainstream corporate media. And I can understand like that feeling and that desire. But for me, I think we need to be looking at this with a little bit more nuance, because in my mind, anytime journalism is under attack, whether it's an attack on the corporate media with all their flaws, or it's a direct attack on the independent media, that means less transparency. That means less, information getting out and to us. And as much as it's fun and easy to just attack and kind of use the mainstream media as a punching bag, one of the points I think people need to recognize is nearly every major story that we know about, whether it's MK Ultra, whether it's the CIA infiltrating the media, which came out in congressional reports in the 60s and 70s, is information that came through the mainstream media. So yes, it's true that they do a lot of lying, but I just really have been trying to push back on this thing that people seem to think mainstream equals all bad, alternative equals all truth. It's just not that black and white. It's a lot more nuanced than that. And so there's millions, and I'm sure you've worked with some of them, Kim, there's millions of people working in mainstream media, and many of them do great work. They're not people who are influencers or who are, they might be your local reporter doing small stuff in your community that, never makes the front page. But there's just this really black and white view of anything from mainstream media is bad. So then when Pete Hegseth kicks them out of the Pentagon, yeah, look at them, they're walking out with their boxes. Or when Trump sues them, yeah, that's good for us. It's just simply not the case. They've got people confused and thinking that if something's good for Trump or good for his team, then that means it's good for the American people, when I think nothing could be further from the truth. Again, you don't have to, this isn't a defense of mainstream media so much as saying when these things happen, and then when they get rid of all the corporate media and the Pentagon, and then they say, hey, we have now 60 new people coming in, and they're all right-wing influencers who we know are pro-Trump already, that's not going to be good for information getting out of the Pentagon and coming out. And also this idea that leaks are bad for us. Like, no, the Pentagon doesn't want leaks because it makes them look bad. But leaks, when information gets leaked or whistleblowers come out, even if it's tough information and hard to swallow and maybe even especially when it's bad information like that, that's good for the truth. That's good for transparency. And we need that. So when they start to try to consolidate the media, like you mentioned, Ellison, he's trying to buy TikTok. His son just was part of the Paramount Skydance merger. Now they're trying to buy Warner Brothers. And just for people's awareness, I mean, that puts them in control of MTV, Comedy Central, Paramount Streaming, and dozens of CBS affiliate stations around the country where they can push whatever pro-Zionist or whatever message they want. This isn't good for us. It might be good for Trump and his cronies, but so I understand the sort of desire to want to laugh at and make fun of the corporate media when Trump does something like this or his team does this, but in the bigger, grander picture, I don't think this is going to be good at all.
Thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. It is free for you to watch. Again, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, KimIversonShow.com. See you there.